The morning started like any other Tuesday in 2187. Jake Morrison sat in the observation deck of Genesis Station, Earth's largest orbital defense platform, watching the sunrise paint the planet below in shades of gold and blue. He had been stationed here for 2 years, and the view never got old. Earth looked peaceful from up here. The cities sparkled like jewels, and the oceans were deep blue mirrors reflecting clouds. Jake sipped his coffee and checked the monitoring systems. Everything looked normal. The 3 colony worlds humanity had established were sending their routine reports. New Hope was expanding its agricultural zones. Destiny had just completed a new residential district. Eden Prime was preparing for another wave of settlers. Life was good. Humanity had finally learned to work together, and the future seemed bright. Then the alarm started screaming. Jake dropped his coffee mug and ran to his station. The screens lit up with warnings. Sensors were detecting massive objects at the edge of the solar system. Ships, huge ships, more than 100 of them, appearing out of nowhere like ghosts materializing in the darkness of space. "What the hell is that?" someone shouted. The communications officer tried to send a greeting signal, standard first contact protocol. Humanity had always dreamed of meeting alien life. They had prepared speeches and welcome, messages in case this day ever came. The aliens answered with, "Weapons fire." The first strike hit New Hope. Jake watched the data stream in horror as the colony world died in seconds. Massive energy beams struck from orbit, turning the surface into molten glass. 12,000 people lived there. Families, children, scientists, farmers building a new world, all gone in a flash of light. "They're firing on Destiny," another officer reported, her voice shaking. Eden Prime just went dark. Jake couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The alien fleet split into groups. Most of the ships headed toward Earth. The communication systems crackled and a message came through. The translation software struggled with the alien language, but the meaning was clear enough. "You are the humans. You are a developing threat. You will be eliminated. Resistance is futile. This is the judgment of the Krell Dominion. No negotiation. No explanation. Just death." The Krell ships opened fire on Earth's orbital stations. Genesis Station shook as explosions tore through the outer ring. Jake grabbed the intercom. "All personnel evacuate immediately. Get to the escape pods. Move, move, move." He ran through the corridors, helping injured crew members, pushing people toward the evacuation zones. The station was dying around them. Fires burned despite the vacuum of space beyond the breached walls. Bodies floated in corridors where explosive decompression had claimed the unlucky. Jake made it to the last evacuation pod with 15 other survivors. As they launched toward Earth, he looked back at Genesis Station. The beautiful structure that had taken 5 years to build was breaking apart, pieces spinning off into the void. Then he looked at Earth. The planet was burning. Kinetic strikes rained down from the Krell fleet. Massive metal rods accelerated to incredible speeds, hitting cities with the force of nuclear weapons. Jake recognized the impact patterns. New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, São Paulo, London, Moscow, Beijing. Every major city was being targeted with brutal efficiency. The escape pod shook as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Through the windows, Jake could see the devastation below. Mushroom clouds rose from where cities used to stand. The sky was turning black with ash and smoke. Captain Linda Hayes was having the worst day of her career. She commanded the ESS Defiant, one of Earth's military vessels. When the attack began, she had been conducting routine patrols near Mars. Now she was racing back to Earth with every engine pushed past safety limits. "How many ships do we have?" she demanded. 32 confirmed responses, her tactical officer reported. "The rest were destroyed in the first strike or can't reach us in time." 32 ships against more than 100 alien warships. Linda had been a naval officer for 20 years. She knew impossible odds when she saw them. "All ships form up on my position," she ordered. "We're going to buy Earth as much time as we can." The human fleet met the Krell in orbit above the Atlantic Ocean. The battle was brutal and one-sided. Human weapons barely scratched the alien shields. Krell energy beams cut through human ships like paper. Linda watched helplessly as ship after ship died. Good captains. Good crews. People she had trained with and served alongside for years. They fought with everything they had, but it wasn't enough. "Captain, we've lost 20 ships," someone reported. "Should we retreat?" Linda looked at Earth below. Billions of people were dying down there. If the fleet ran, there would be nothing between the Krell and complete annihilation. All ships fall back to the moon, she finally ordered. We regroup and figure out what to do next. On Earth's surface, Paul Chen was trying to save as many people as he could. He worked for the Civilian Defense Coordination Office in Denver. When the attack started, he immediately activated the emergency broadcast system and began directing people to underground shelters. The city's warning sirens wailed across every street. People ran in panic, some toward the shelters, others just running anywhere. Paul stood at his post, coordinating with shelter managers, making sure the doors stayed open as long as possible. "Paul, we need to seal the doors," his assistant said. "The sensors are detecting an incoming strike." 2 more minutes, Paul said, watching the crowds still flowing into the shelter entrance. "We can save 200 more people in 2 minutes. We might not have 2 minutes." Paul saw a woman carrying 2 children, struggling to keep up with the crowd. He saw an old man being helped by teenagers. He saw a whole elementary school class being led by their teachers. "1 more minute," he said. The sky lit up. Paul looked up and saw the kinetic strike coming down like the fist of an angry god. Time seemed to slow. He thought of his wife and daughter. Hoped they had made it to shelter on the other side of the city. "Close the doors," he whispered. The blast hit Denver 3 seconds after the shelter doors sealed. The city vanished in fire and thunder. Paul felt the shelter shake, felt the mountain of concrete and steel above them groan under the impact, but the shelter held. In the darkness, with the emergency lights casting red shadows, Paul listened to the people crying and praying around him. 3,000 people safe. In a city of 2 million, he had saved 3,000 people. The first day of the war ended with Earth in ruins. 3 billion people dead. The orbital defenses destroyed. Most of the fleet gone. The 3 colony worlds eliminated. The Krell commander, War Master Throck, looked at the burning planet below and felt satisfied. Another species eliminated. Another potential threat removed. In a few months, the survivors would turn on each other. Disease and starvation would finish what his weapons had started. Humanity was broken. The war was over, that's what he thought. 6 months had passed since the sky burned. Earth looked dead from space. Thick clouds of ash covered most of the planet, blocking the sun and turning day into permanent twilight. The beautiful blue marble Jake Morrison had watched from Genesis Station was now a gray shadow of itself. But humanity was still alive, deep underground. In old mine shafts and military bunkers and subway tunnels turned into shelters, millions of survivors held on. They rationed food and water. They tended to the injured and buried the dead. They tried to maintain some sense of order in a world that had gone completely insane. Colonel Marcus Webb ran military operations from inside Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. The massive underground complex had survived the initial attack and became the center of human resistance. Marcus was 52 years old, a career soldier who had fought in 3 regional conflicts before the world unified. He had never expected to command Earth's defense against aliens. The war room displays showed the grim reality. Krell occupation forces controlled key locations on every continent. They had established bases at former military sites and were systematically hunting for survivors. Their strategy was clear: let the humans struggle underground until starvation and despair did the work for them. Marcus had other plans. "How many fighters do we have?" he asked his staff. "About 15,000 with military training," Major Kate Sullivan reported. She was young, only 28, but she had proven herself capable during the evacuation operations. Another 30,000 civilians have volunteered to fight. Weapons? Whatever we salvaged before the bases were destroyed, plus some Krell equipment we've captured from supply convoys. Marcus studied the map showing Krell positions. They were spread thin, overconfident. They thought humans were beaten. That was their first mistake. "Start hitting their supply lines," Marcus ordered. "Small teams. Hit and run, make them afraid to leave their bases." The resistance began the next week. Groups of human fighters emerged from tunnels at night, attacked Krell convoys and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They used improvised explosives, captured alien weapons, and knowledge of the terrain the Krell didn't have. Every small victory mattered. Every stolen supply crate meant more food for the shelters. Every destroyed Krell vehicle was one less threat. In a secret facility buried beneath the ruins of Boston, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was trying to save humanity with science instead of bullets. She stood in front of a partially disassembled Krell fighter craft, surrounded by monitors and computer systems salvaged from a dozen different locations. Elena was 34 and had been one of Earth's leading quantum physicists before the war. Now she was humanity's best hope for understanding alien technology. The power system operates on principles we've theorized about but never achieved, she explained to her small team. They're manipulating quantum states at scales we thought impossible. Can we use it? Asked Dr. Henry Kim, her primary assistant. Better. We can improve it. Elena pointed to her calculations. Their systems are advanced but rigid. They follow fixed patterns. Human quantum computing is less powerful but more flexible. We can adapt. They can't. She worked 18-hour days sleeping in a cot next to her equipment. Every breakthrough brought new possibilities. Every discovery gave humanity another advantage. The Krell had better weapons, but humans were learning fast. Paul Chen had become a leader among the civilian survivors. After Denver was destroyed, he had guided his shelter group through the chaos of the first months. When they made contact with other survivors, he helped organize supply routes and communication networks between the underground cities. He tried not to think about his wife and daughter. Their shelter on the east side of Denver had taken a direct hit. He had seen the damage reports. There were no survivors. Some nights, alone in his small room, Paul allowed himself to remember. His daughter's laugh, his wife's smile, the life they had planned together. Then he pushed the grief down and went back to work. Thousands of people depended on him. He couldn't afford to fall apart. We've established contact with the Australian settlements, his assistant told him one morning. They're struggling with water purification. Send them the specs for our filtration system, Paul said, and see if they have any medical supplies to trade. The Chicago shelter is running low on antibiotics. This was his life now, solving problems, keeping people alive, making sure the children in the shelters had something to eat and somewhere safe to sleep. It wasn't much, but it was purpose. Captain Linda Hayes, now promoted to admiral after most of Earth's senior officers died in the first attack, was working on something ambitious. She had made it to Mars with the surviving ships of Earth's fleet. The Krell had ignored Mars, considering it not worth the effort to occupy. That oversight gave humanity a chance. Hidden in caverns beneath the Martian surface, human engineers were building new ships. They used salvaged materials, captured Krell technology, and designs based on Dr. Rodriguez's research. The work was slow and difficult. Resources were limited, but every week another ship took shape. Linda walked through the construction bays, watching workers weld hull plates and install weapon systems. These ships were different from the ones Earth had built before. Smaller, faster, designed around the weaknesses Elena's team had discovered in Krell shields and armor. How long until the first squadron is ready? Linda asked her chief engineer. 3 months for basic operations. 6 months before we can mount any serious offensive. 6 months. Half a year while people suffered under Krell occupation. But there was no rushing this. They needed to do it right. One chance was all they would get. Jake Morrison had survived the crash of his escape pod, though barely. He spent 2 months recovering from his injuries in a shelter beneath what used to be Chicago. When he finally healed enough to move, he volunteered to join Marcus Webb's resistance forces. He was assigned to a squad that specialized in raids on Krell supply depots. 8 people, all with military backgrounds, all with personal reasons to hate the Krell. They lived in tunnels, moved at night, and struck without mercy. Jake led a raid on a Krell outpost in what used to be Ohio. His team planted explosives on the fuel storage tanks and escaped before the Krell even knew they were there. The explosion lit up the night sky and destroyed enough fuel to ground Krell air patrols for a week. After each mission, Jake thought about his crew on Genesis Station. The friends who hadn't made it to the escape pods. The people who had died in the first seconds of the war. He fought for them. Every Krell soldier he killed was a small payment on a debt that could never be fully repaid. Back in Cheyenne Mountain, Colonel Marcus Webb received reports from resistance cells around the world. The Krell were getting nervous. They had expected easy occupation of a broken species. Instead, they faced constant harassment. Supply lines were unreliable. Patrols disappeared. Bases were sabotaged. The Krell sent messages to their command requesting reinforcements. But War Master Throck was far away now, conquering other systems. He sent back orders to deal with the remaining humans efficiently. The Krell tried. They increased patrols. They executed prisoners publicly as warnings. They bombed locations where they suspected resistance activity. But humanity had learned something in the 6 months since the invasion. They had learned that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant fighting back. It meant making the enemy pay for every inch of ground. In the shelters, people carved words into the walls. Remember the fallen. Earth will rise. No surrender. We will have vengeance. Dr. Elena Rodriguez made a breakthrough in her 7th month of research. She discovered the exact frequency that could disrupt Krell shields. She also found a way to overload their power cores remotely. The information was immediately sent to Admiral Hayes on Mars. Paul Chen distributed the news through the Survivor Network. For the first time since the attack, people had something more than just hope. They had a plan. They had weapons that could work. They had a future that didn't end in extinction. 1 year after the Krell destroyed their world, humanity was still alive. Battered, grieving, reduced to a fraction of their former population. But not broken. In Cheyenne Mountain, Colonel Marcus Webb called a meeting of the resistance leaders. On the screens, faces appeared from underground bases around the world. Soldiers, scientists, civilian coordinators, all united by loss and purpose. The time for hiding is over, Marcus said. We've survived. We've learned. We've prepared. Now we take our planet back. The vote was unanimous. 18 months after the invasion, the moon became a battlefield again. Admiral Linda Hayes stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Rising Phoenix. Around her, 49 other ships held formation. These weren't the vessels Earth had built before the war. These were something new, something born from desperation and human ingenuity. Each ship incorporated technology stolen from the Krell and improved by human engineers. They had Elena Rodriguez's frequency disruptors built into their weapons. They had armor designed to deflect rather than absorb energy beams. They had engines that could accelerate faster than Krell computers could track. The fleet emerged from behind Mars, where they had been hiding and building for over a year. Their target was the Krell command base on the moon. It was time to announce that humanity was back. All ships weapons free, Linda ordered. Remember your training. Fast strikes, keep moving, exploit their blind spots. The Krell base detected them too late. Human ships came in from multiple angles, moving in patterns that confused the alien targeting systems. They launched missiles that split into smaller warheads mid-flight. They fired beam weapons at the exact frequency to punch through Krell shields. The battle was chaos. Ships twisted and dodged and fired. Explosions bloomed in the vacuum of space. The Krell fought back hard, but they were designed for fighting enemies who followed predictable tactical doctrine. Humans didn't fight fair. They fought to win. Commander Jake Morrison piloted one of the new fighter craft. He had been selected to test the prototype because he knew how to push machines beyond their limits. His fighter, designated Red Dawn, was fast and deadly. He led a squadron of 20 pilots against the base's defensive platforms. Gold Squadron hit the northern gun emplacements. He called over the radio. Silver Squadron, target their communications array. Stay fast, stay unpredictable. The fighters swarmed like angry bees, too small and quick for the Krell weapons to track effectively. Jake watched his targeting computer light up as his missiles found their marks. One gun platform exploded, then another. Then the communications array went dark. The Krell tried to adapt, but adaptation took time. Humans didn't give them time. After 12 hours of fighting, the moon base fell. The Krell defenders were either dead or captured. Human troops, led by veterans from Colonel Webb's resistance forces, secured the facility and began stripping it for useful technology and intelligence. Linda stood in what used to be the Krell command center and sent a message to Earth. The moon is ours. Operation Redemption is a success. Earth, we're coming home. On Earth's surface, the uprising began exactly at midnight, coordinated across every time zone. Colonel Marcus Webb had spent months planning this moment. Resistance cells that had been hiding and conducting small raids now emerged in force. They had weapons. They had targets. They had nothing left to lose. In North America, 3,000 fighters attacked Krell supply depots and garrison points simultaneously. In Europe, underground resistance groups seized alien communications facilities. In Asia, Africa, South America, and Australia, Humans struck at every Krell position at once. The Krell occupation force, already nervous from months of harassment, suddenly found themselves fighting a real war. Human fighters emerged from tunnels they didn't know existed. Attacks came from directions they hadn't fortified. Weapons that shouldn't be able to hurt them were punching through their armor. Jake Morrison landed at what used to be New York, now just ruins occupied by Krell forces. His fighter squadron provided air support for ground troops who were pushing into the alien compound. He strafed Krell positions, watching his cannon fire tear through their light vehicles. "Ground forces, you're clear to advance," he reported. The human soldiers moved forward, using tactics learned from a year of guerrilla warfare. They didn't stand and trade fire like traditional armies. They used cover, moved constantly, and targeted weak points. The Krell had superior technology, but humans had motivation and adaptability. Paul Chen wasn't a soldier, but he carried a rifle anyway. He led a civilian militia in the tunnels beneath Chicago, guiding them to strike at a Krell logistics hub. His group was farmers and teachers and engineers, people who had never expected to fight a war. But they had learned. They planted explosives throughout the facility, working quickly and quietly. When the charges detonated, the entire complex collapsed. Paul and his people were already a mile away, moving through tunnels to their next target. "How many more?" someone asked him. "As many as it takes," Paul said. Within a week, Earth was free. The Krell occupation forces were destroyed or had retreated to their ships and fled. Humans stood under the ash-darkened sky and celebrated. They had won. Their planet was theirs again. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked in a laboratory that had been set up in the captured moon base. She was analyzing Krell computers, pulling intelligence data from their systems. What she found made her blood run cold. The Krell Dominion had destroyed over 200 civilizations. Earth was just the latest. There were records of planets glassed from orbit, species driven to extinction, entire cultures erased. The Krell did this routinely, methodically, wherever they found developing spacefaring civilizations. Elena also found something else. War Master Throck was coming back. He had received reports about the human uprising. He was gathering the full strength of the Krell fleet and would arrive at Earth in approximately 6 months. She took the information to Admiral Hayes. Linda studied the data with a grim expression. "How many ships?" "Estimates suggest over 500 warships," Elena said. "Everything the Krell can spare. Throck is furious. He's going to try to wipe us out completely." "Can we win against those numbers?" "Not if we fight defensively," Elena said. She pulled up a map of Krell territory. "But if we take the fight to them first, disrupt their supply lines, force them to defend multiple locations, we might have a chance." Linda looked at the map for a long time. What Elena was suggesting went against every instinct of military defense. Earth had just been freed. The smart thing would be to fortify and prepare for the coming assault. But Linda had learned over the past 18 months that humans didn't win by being smart. They won by being bold. "I need to talk to the council," she said. The Global Council met in Cheyenne Mountain. It consisted of military leaders, civilian coordinators, and representatives from every major survivor settlement. Colonel Marcus Webb opened the meeting. "We have 6 months before Throck arrives with everything he has," Marcus said. "Admiral Hayes has a proposal. I think we should listen." Linda stepped forward and presented the plan. "Take the fleet out. Strike Krell colonies and supply bases. Force Throck to divide his forces. Make him fight the kind of war humans were good at. Unpredictable, fast-moving, hitting where the enemy was weak. It's risky," she admitted. "If we fail, Earth will be defenseless." Paul Chen stood up. He had been elected to represent the civilian survivors. His voice carried the weight of everyone who had lost someone. Everyone who had fought to stay alive in the dark months. "They came to our home," he said quietly. "They killed 3 billion of us. They thought we would just die. They were wrong. We survived. We fought back. And now we have a choice. We can sit here and wait for them to come kill us again, or we can make them pay for what they did." He paused, looking around the room at faces marked by grief and determination. "I say we make them pay, not just for us. For every species they've destroyed, someone has to stop them. It might as well be us." The room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then everyone was on their feet applauding. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would go on the offensive. Over the next months, Earth's industrial capacity kicked into high gear. Factories that had been hidden underground emerged. Shipyards on Mars and the Moon worked around the clock. Every resource, every bit of salvaged material, every ounce of human effort went into building a fleet. Jake Morrison trained new pilots on the tactics that had worked against the Krell. "They're stronger than us," he told them. "They have better shields and bigger guns, but they're predictable. They follow patterns. We don't. That's our edge." Dr. Elena Rodriguez developed new weapons based on Krell weaknesses. She created missiles that could change course mid-flight to confuse tracking systems. She designed bombs that could overload power cores. She gave humanity teeth. Colonel Marcus Webb organized ground forces for boarding actions and planetary assaults. If they were going to strike Krell territory, they needed troops who could fight on alien worlds. And Paul Chen made sure everyone remembered why they were doing this. He established memorials in every settlement. He made sure the names of the dead were recorded. He organized ceremonies where people could grieve and remember. "We fight for them," he said, "for everyone we lost, and for everyone in the galaxy who might be next if we don't stop the Krell now." 6 months passed quickly. The human fleet grew to 120 ships. It wasn't enough to match the Krell in raw numbers, but it would have to be enough. Admiral Linda Hayes stood on the bridge of the Rising Phoenix and looked at the fleet assembled around her. Behind them, Earth still showed the scars of invasion. Ahead of them lay the unknown dangers of enemy territory. "All ships," she broadcast, "we're not fighting for revenge. We're fighting." The first strike came without warning, just as the Krell had attacked Earth. A Krell mining colony orbiting a gas giant suddenly found human ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The colony's defense systems activated, but they were designed to repel pirates and small raiders. They weren't ready for an organized military assault. Admiral Linda Hayes watched from the Rising Phoenix as her ships tore through the defenses. "Remember the rules," she broadcast. "Military targets only. No civilian casualties if we can avoid them." The colony's garrison fought hard, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Human ships danced through their fire, hitting weak points that Elena Rodriguez's intelligence had identified. Within 4 hours, the garrison surrendered, but Linda didn't occupy the colony. She destroyed the military installations, disabled the communications array, and left. Her fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel before Krell reinforcements could arrive. This became the pattern. Human strike forces hit and ran. They destroyed supply depots, wrecked garrison posts, and vanished before the Krell could respond. They fought like ghosts, appearing suddenly and disappearing just as fast. Commander Jake Morrison led one of the smaller squadrons, operating independently from the main fleet. His group specialized in deep strikes, hitting targets far inside Krell territory. It was dangerous work. Several times they barely escaped before Krell battleships arrived. "Gold Leader, we have a problem," his wingman called during a raid on a fuel depot. Krell cruiser just dropped out of FTL, big one. Jake checked his sensors. The cruiser was launching fighters. "Too many fighters. All wings, finish your runs and get out," he ordered. "Red and blue squadrons, cover our exit. Gold squadron with me." They fought their way clear, losing 2 pilots in the process. Jake felt each loss like a knife in his chest. These were his people, his responsibility, but the raid succeeded. The fuel depot was destroyed, and that would keep Krell ships grounded for weeks. The cost was always high. But humanity had learned to measure victory differently now. Colonel Marcus Webb led ground operations on a Krell prison world. Intelligence suggested they held captives from multiple species, people taken from conquered worlds and used as slave labor. Marcus brought 500 troops for what should have been a simple smash-and-grab operation. It turned into a 3-day battle. The Krell defenders were better trained than expected. They held fortified positions and had heavy weapons. Marcus's troops had to fight building by building, room by room. The casualties mounted, but they freed the prisoners. Over 2,000 beings from 40 different species. Most were malnourished and sick, but alive. As Marcus helped them onto the transport ships, he saw something in their eyes that made the battle worthwhile. Hope, a small alien, reptilian in appearance, grabbed Marcus's hand. "You fight the Krell," it said in broken English. "You can win?" "We're trying," Marcus said. "We help. Our people will help. Tell us how to fight." Word spread across the galaxy. Other species, enslaved and conquered by the Krell, began to watch humanity's war. Some started their own resistance movements. The Krell Dominion, which had ruled through fear for generations, suddenly found cracks in their empire. Dr. Elena Rodriguez deployed her masterpiece 6 months into the offensive. She called it the Cascade Array. It was a weapon that could disable Krell ships by overloading their power cores, creating a chain reaction that spread from ship to ship like dominoes falling. The first deployment happened during a battle in the Kepler system. Human ships lured a Krell battle group into a trap. When the Krell fleet was in position, Elena activated the array from a hidden platform on an asteroid. 30 Krell ships went dark in seconds. Their power cores overloaded, their shields failed, and their weapons died. The human fleet moved in and destroyed them at leisure. Admiral Hayes called it a miracle. Elena called it applied physics. Either way, it changed the balance of the war, but the weapon had a cost. The Cascade arrays were complex and hard to build. Each one took months to construct and could only be used once. The Krell also started adapting their systems to resist the overload effect. Technology was an arms race, and both sides were running hard. Jake Morrison lost his best friend during a raid on a Krell shipyard. Commander Nicole Grant had been flying his wings since the first battles over Earth. She was skilled, brave, and always had a joke ready even in the worst situations. Her ship took a direct hit from a Krell defense platform. Jake watched it explode. 1 second she was there talking on the radio. The next second just debris and expanding gas. He wanted to stay, to recover her body, to do something. But the mission came first. It always came first. He led the squadron back to the carrier and filed his report. Then he went to his quarters and cried for the first time since the war began. War wasn't glorious. It wasn't an adventure. It was losing people you cared about and having to keep fighting anyway. It was making decisions that got people killed and living with those decisions. It was grinding forward through pain and exhaustion because stopping meant losing everything. Paul Chen coordinated resource distribution from Earth. The planet was recovering slowly. The ash in the atmosphere was settling. Crops were growing again in protected biodomes. Cities were being rebuilt, though they would never be the same. But the war effort demanded everything Earth could produce. Food, medical supplies, ammunition, replacement parts for ships. Every transport that left Earth was packed with supplies for the fleet. Every message from the front lines asked for more. Paul worked 20-hour days, managing logistics and keeping the supply lines flowing. He lived on coffee and determination. At night he dreamed of his family and woke up knowing he couldn't stop. Not while the war continued. The Krell were reeling. For the first time in their history, they were losing territory. War Master Throck recalled his fleets from expansion operations and consolidated his forces. He sent messages to his commanders. Humanity must be destroyed completely. No half measures. No mercy. 6 months of constant warfare had cost both sides dearly. The human fleet was down to 90 ships. Casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Resources were running thin. But the Krell had lost over a third of their fleet and dozens of colonies. Admiral Hayes received intelligence reports that made her pause. Throck was gathering everything he had left. Over 500 warships, the full remaining strength of the Krell Dominion. He was coming to Earth personally. She called a meeting of her senior officers. "We always knew this was coming," she said, looking at tired faces around the conference table. "We've hurt them. We've shown the galaxy that the Krell can be beaten. But now comes the final test. Can we win?" Someone asked. "I don't know," Linda admitted, "but we're going to try." She sent orders to all human ships. Return to Earth. This was it. The final battle. Everything they had fought for would be decided in one massive engagement. Jake Morrison brought his squadron home. They were down to 8 fighters from the original 20. The pilots were exhausted, running on adrenaline and stubborn refusal to quit, but they were ready. Colonel Marcus Webb prepared Earth's defenses. Every missile battery that could be salvaged or built. Every defense platform that could be powered up. Every soldier ready to fight on the ground if it came to that. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked on a final surprise. She had one last trick, one desperate gamble that might make the difference, but it would require someone to deliver it directly to the Krell command ship. It would be a suicide mission. Paul Chen stood on the surface of Earth for the first time in months. The sky was still gray but lighter now. He could almost see the sun through the clouds. He thought about his wife and daughter, about everyone who had died in the first attack. "We're going to finish this," he said to the empty sky. One way or another, the Krell fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, Sensors detected them long before they were visible. 500 ships all converging on Earth. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in human history. Warmaster Throck sent a message. It was simple and final. Humans, you should have died quietly. Now you will die screaming. There is no escape. There is no hope. There is only extinction. Admiral Linda Hayes broadcast her response to every ship in the human fleet and every shelter on Earth. Come and take it. The Battle of Earth was about to begin. The Krell fleet filled the space near Earth like a swarm of metal locusts. 500 warships, each larger than anything humanity had built. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields could withstand nuclear strikes. They represented centuries of conquest and technological superiority. Against them stood 120 human ships, smaller, weaker, but crewed by people who had nothing left to lose. Admiral Linda Hayes stood on the bridge of the IE, Rising Phoenix, and looked at the tactical display. The odds were impossible. If this was just about numbers and firepower, humanity had already lost. But it wasn't about numbers. It was about will. All ships assume attack formation Delta, she ordered. Fighter wings, launch when ready. Ground batteries, prepare to fire on my mark. Jake Morrison sat in the cockpit of Red Dawn. Around him, 300 other fighters were launching from carriers and orbital platforms. This was it. Every pilot knew that most of them wouldn't come back. They launched anyway. All wings, listen up, Jake broadcast. We're not trying to destroy them all. We can't, but we can hurt them. We can make them bleed. We can make them regret ever coming to our system. For Earth, for everyone we lost. Make every shot count. The fighters screamed forward in waves, tiny specks against the massive Krell capital ships. They fired missiles and cannons darting between the larger vessels, targeting engines and weapons pods. The Krell point defense systems took a terrible toll, but the human pilots kept coming. The main fleets met in the space between Earth and the Moon. The battle was chaos from the first second. Human ships moved in patterns designed to confuse Krell targeting computers. They paired up, one drawing fire while the other struck at weak points. They sacrificed damaged ships in ramming attacks to take out larger vessels. The Krell fought with overwhelming firepower. Their beam weapons carved through human ships. Their missiles tracked relentlessly. But humans fought with desperation and innovation. Every tactic they had learned in 2 years of war came into play. Dr. Elena Rodriguez activated her cascade arrays from hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt. The weapons had been carefully placed over months, positioned where the Krell fleet would have to pass. She triggered them in sequence, and waves of Krell ships went dark as their power cores overloaded. 50 Krell vessels died in the first 5 minutes, but the Krell adapted quickly. Their engineers rerouted power systems, and the remaining arrays became less effective. Elena watched her masterwork become obsolete in real time. It bought us time, she said to her team. That's all we could ask for. On Earth's surface, Colonel Marcus Webb commanded the planetary defense batteries, massive railguns and missile platforms, everything that could be salvaged or rebuilt since the liberation. They fired into space, adding their strength to the fleet's defense. The Krell landed troops despite the orbital battle, thousands of alien soldiers and dropships, heading for major cities and military installations. They planned to destroy Earth's ability to fight back while the space battle raged. Marcus was ready. Human soldiers and civilian militia met the Krell at every landing zone. The fighting was brutal and close. Buildings became fortresses. Streets became killing zones. Every block was contested. Paul Chen fought in Chicago, defending one of the underground shelters where thousands of civilians had taken refuge. He had never imagined himself as a soldier, but war had made warriors of everyone. He fired his rifle at advancing Krell troops, fell back when they pushed forward, and advanced when they retreated. A young woman next to him, barely 20 years old, took a hit and went down. Paul dragged her to cover and put pressure on the wound while still firing with his other hand. A medic arrived and took over. The girl looked up at Paul with frightened eyes. "Are we going to die?" she asked. "Not if I can help it," Paul said. The space battle raged for hours. Ships burned and died. Explosions lit up the darkness. Debris filled the orbital space around Earth. The casualty count on both sides climbed into the thousands, then tens of thousands. Jake Morrison's fighter wing was down to 4 planes. His sensors showed damage across his craft. Fuel was low, ammunition was almost gone, But the Krill command ship was still intact, still coordinating the enemy fleet. "Gold Squadron, what's your status?" Admiral Hayes called over the command channel. "Still flying," Jake reported. "Barely. I need someone to deliver a package to the Krell flagship. It's a concentrated cascade bomb, one shot. Has to be placed inside their shields." Jake understood immediately. It was a suicide run. The Krell flagship was the most heavily defended ship in their fleet. Getting close enough to deliver a bomb meant not coming back. He thought about everyone he had lost. His crew on Genesis Station, Nicole Grant, all the pilots who had died under his command, his family killed in the first attack. "I'll do it," he said. "Jake, you don't have to," Linda said quietly. "Yes, I do. This is what we're here for." He downloaded the targeting data and turned his battered fighter toward the Krell flagship. The massive vessel was at the center of the enemy formation, a huge dreadnought bristling with weapons. It was beautiful in a terrible way, a monument to military power. Jake pushed his engines to maximum. Alarms screamed as systems overloaded. Point defense fire filled the space around him. His shields died. Armor plating burned away. But he kept going. "For Earth," he whispered. He released the bomb at point-blank range directly into the Krell flagship's main hangar bay. Then his fighter, too damaged to maneuver, crashed into the hull in a fireball. The cascade bomb detonated inside the Krell shields. The power overload was massive, amplified by the flagship's enormous reactors. The chain reaction tore through the ship's structure. Secondary explosions rippled across the hull. War Master Throck died when the bridge section separated from the main ship. He had time to realize that the primitive humans had beaten him. Then there was only fire. The Krell flagship broke apart. Pieces of the massive vessel tumbled through space, colliding with other Krell ships. The carefully organized enemy formation dissolved into chaos. Admiral Hayes didn't hesitate. "All ships press the attack. Hit them while they're confused." The human fleet surged forward. Ships that had been playing defensive suddenly went on the offensive. They exploited the chaos, targeting enemy vessels that were distracted or damaged. The tide of battle shifted, but the cost was terrible. Human ships died by the dozens. Earth's orbital defenses were decimated. The casualties mounted higher than anyone had imagined. On Earth's surface, the Krell troops began to falter. With their command ship gone and orbital support failing, they lost coordination. Human forces pushed back, street by street, building by building. Paul Chen led a counterattack that reclaimed the shelter entrance. Bodies lay everywhere, human and alien alike. The young woman he had saved earlier was back on her feet, firing her rifle despite her injury. People who should have been safe underground were fighting and dying to protect their home. The space battle raged for 3 days. Earth's sun rose and set 3 times over a planet that had become a battlefield again. Ships fought until they had no ammunition left, then rammed enemy vessels in final acts of defiance. Pilots stayed at their controls until their craft fell apart around them. Slowly, impossibly, the Krell fleet broke. Without their command ship and with losses mounting beyond sustainable levels, the surviving Krell vessels began to retreat. They jumped to faster-than-light travel in 1s and 2s, fleeing back to their territory. Admiral Hayes watched them go on her tactical display. The Rising Phoenix was heavily damaged. Her crew had fought for 72 hours straight. She was exhausted beyond words. "All ships stand down," she ordered. "Secure the orbital space. Begin search and rescue operations." The Battle of Earth was over. Humanity had won, but the victory felt hollow at first. 90 human ships destroyed, thousands of fighters lost, casualties in the hundreds of thousands. Earth's surface was scarred again, cities damaged by ground fighting, orbital infrastructure in ruins. Admiral Linda Hayes died 3 hours after the battle ended. Her injuries, sustained when an explosion breached the Rising Phoenix's bridge, were too severe. She spent her final moments receiving reports that Earth was secure. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Then she closed her eyes for the last time. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in what remained of her laboratory on the moon. Most of her equipment was destroyed in the battle, but the data was safe. The knowledge they had gained, the technology they had developed, all backed up and preserved. She received a message from orbit. Search and rescue teams had found a life pod from Jake Morrison's squadron. He was alive, badly injured but alive. He had ejected just before the crash, and the pod had drifted until a human patrol ship found it. Elena smiled for the first time in days. Some people survived. That was enough. Colonel Marcus Webb organized the cleanup operations on Earth. The Krell ground forces were either eliminated or captured. The cities would need to be rebuilt again, but they had done it before. They could do it again. Paul Chen found the young woman who had asked if they would die. She was in a field hospital recovering from her wounds. He sat next to her bed. "We lived," he said.
"We actually lived," she smiled weakly.
"What happens now?" "We rebuild. We remember, and we make sure no one ever does this to another species again." 3 months later, Earth held a memorial.